Good afternoon and welcome to another great and exciting webinar from Advice Media. My name is Chad Erickson and I'm your host, and looking forward to sharing one of the best messages I think that we've ever shared. This is phenomenal, and I feel completely blessed to have our guest Rob Shallenberger here with us today from Becoming Your Best Global Leadership. But to thank also each of you for taking time to be here with us today. And whether you're listening live or listening afterwards, I'm confident you're going to find this message to be one that you can implement in your practices and in your life, and that it will totally transform you. This is something I've been looking forward to for a long time. But anyway, I'm going to get to Rob's introduction in a minute. I just want to make sure that we set up our ground rules for today and can let you know what we're looking for. So with our setup, you have the opportunity to chat, ask questions, and invite you to do so. We have over the control panel, you'll see the chat feature over there. So if you do have any questions you would like to ask Rob, please enter them in there. I will facilitate those and be our moderator on this today. So again, please do that. He would welcome those questions as well. But feel free to take copious notes, and we've got some kind of special offer at the end as well, which is amazing. Well, let me go ahead and introduce our guest today, Rob Shallenberger. Rob is one of the world's leading authorities on leadership and execution. He's trained and coached hundreds of companies around the world, to include many Fortune 500 organizations. After spending 2 years of service in Bolivia, he attended Utah State University, where he graduated in 2000. He went on to earn an MBA from Colorado State University. He served as an F-16 fighter pilot in the Air Force for 11 years. He was also an advanced agent for Air Force One and traveled the world working with foreign embassies and the Secret Service. He's the CEO of Becoming Your Best Global Leadership. His company released a national best-selling book titled Becoming Your Best, which I've read multiple times. It's the 12 Principles of Highly Successful Leaders. He's also the author of 3 other books, and I've read some of those as well. He considers his greatest accomplishment to be that he's been married for 19 years and has 4 beautiful children, and he does have an awesome family. A little more on Rob. We invited Rob in to Advice Media about 4 years ago, the recommendation of a colleague and friend. And he came in and actually helped our organization truly create our vision and values. And with their leadership plan, I've personally attended, and we've sent many members of our teams to attend their leadership training and have implemented their training in our organization. So we've seen firsthand what can happen when you truly have an awesome vision. I also consider Rob to be a close personal friend, and grateful for you to be here. Rob, thank you so much for taking time to be here with us today.
Well, thank you so much, Chad. And Chad is amazing, and what a great association with Advice Media. Grateful for them hosting this webinar, and for your attendance on this webinar. Says a lot about you and your character and who you are. So first of all, thank you, Chad and Advice Media. And second, thank you to you for being here. And I promise to make this worth your time on the webinar today. Now, think about this. As we get into this, Chad said, there's these things that can have a huge impact. And the title of this is How to Build a Thriving Practice and Have Your Best Year Ever. Well, that's a pretty tall promise. That's not a light statement. Yet I'm confident that what I share with you today, even on this short webinar, even though it's just the beginning, can have, like Chad said, a huge impact in your organization and your personal life. That this isn't just a flavor of the month. It's not just something that comes by and, it's a shiny object that you chase for a few weeks and then start looking for the next one. That this is a process and a template that can give you the chance to truly have a thriving business and not only as a team, your best year ever. And this transcends just money. Yes, I'm talking about money. To have your best financial year ever. In addition to that, though, is how do you build a practice and a place where people are excited to be there, where the nurses and doctors are aligned, where the office managers aligned, where it's a fun environment and it's truly an exciting place to come be a part of. Isn't that what we all want? And that doesn't just happen overnight. That happens with a process. So Chad gave my bio and a background, and that was great. He highlighted the flying of the F-16 for 11 years. That was incredible. Allowed me to develop some planning and execution skills. Since then, 7 years ago, my dad and I started Becoming Your Best Global Leadership together. And that's given us the chance to travel all over the world to meet with presidents of countries. We have numerous dentists and doctors who are coaching clients right now. And we've had the chance to see what makes great practices great. What sets apart certain organizations that are just thriving and killing it from everyone else. And there are certain things that they do that are very predictable. And during this webinar, we're going to touch on just a few of those and see what impact they'll have on you. Because in the end, we're talking about you and your practice. And what does that mean to you? Well, one of the things that I've discovered in the many years of doing this is that most people are task saturated. Now, that's a fighter pilot term, and it means, when you're in the cockpit, the most important thing you can do is fly the jet. Yet there have been accidents where pilots have died because they were looking at their radar when they should have been looking out the window. Because they were task saturated, they started misprioritizing. And what we found is that as our task saturation increases, our performance and peace and happiness tend to decrease. And so this is a way to start helping with that task saturation and create alignment and focus in your life. The other thing I've found is that teams that are aligned and focused typically have high morale and they are very profitable. These teams tend to be in the minority, though, because they're transformational. And most of us are in a transactional trap of life where we're just going from thing to thing, and it's happening so fast. The other thing that I've learned, it's been interesting in this particular arena, is that doctors oftentimes become doctors not realizing that they're going to run a business. I was sitting next to and talking with the dean of the School of Medicine at the University of New Mexico, and she said, Rob, one of the biggest failings that we have right now in the way that we train doctors and put them through medical school is we train them extremely well in their craft or their specialty, whatever that is. What they don't realize, though, and what oftentimes is a surprise to them, is that they're leading a team and running a business. So it's not just the skill of surgery or pediatrics or whatever it is. They're trying to lead a team. And oftentimes what we've seen is there's this conflict sometimes between the office manager and the doctor, or between the staff and the doctor, and they don't have clear processes set up. And this causes a lot of conflict, miscommunication, and these things don't have to be. And that's why I credit you with being on this webinar. We're going to start today with a few things that will help address that. And how do you create that alignment for your entire staff, not only to become highly profitable, but to make it a fun place where you're excited to be there. Now, what's the hard way of doing this? You can keep doing the same thing over and over and just hope that things get better. Well, that doesn't work with just about anything. That's the definition of insanity. The other thing that typically doesn't work, or it takes a long time for it to work, is to try and figure this out by yourself. What's the easier way? Well, we all know this. I mean, it really applies to almost any area of life, and that is to learn from someone else's successes and failures. Someone else who's put thousands of hours and time and research into something. And that's where you can find a process and a system that helps you. And once you see that it's starting to work, like Chad talked about, follow the recipe. Don't get caught up with every little shiny object that we see and go after that. Stick with the process and grow and develop and get better and better. And there's this quote I love that says, good, better, best. Never let it rest till the good is better and the better is best. So no matter where you are today as a practice, as an office, how do you take where you are today, which may be good, and make it even better and continue to get better and better? And that's what you can do when you have a process and a system rather than just a flavor of the month. Now, let me give you a couple of examples of this in real-time action. So we have a 2-day conference that Chad alluded to that we do twice a year. One's in April, actually coming up in 3 weeks. The other is in October. We've had numerous doctors attend. We've had numerous office managers attend, and every once in a while, an entire staff will attend. So the nurses, the office manager, the doctors, and that's phenomenal when they can do that. There was a pediatric clinic that came 6 months ago, and I'll share a brief email with you at the end of this webinar. Prior to coming and talking with the office managers, he said, you know what, we've got all these communication challenges. People are frustrated with each other. Honestly, a lot of times we don't even want to be here because it's just a frustrating experience. And this reflects on the patients. They sense that they can feel it. Well, that's what happens when there's not a structure, a process, or a system. And so after the conference, I'm going to share with you some of the things they did on this webinar. We just got an email 2 months ago, and she's talked about the entire transformation that's happened in that office. She said, we love coming to work and being together now. The doctor does what he needs to do. I, as the office manager, do what I need to do. We both have our responsibilities outlined, and it is a totally different feeling in the office. And that story has been repeated over and over again once you have a system and a process. Here's another example of this. This is a good friend of ours. He happens to be a coaching client for the last 1.5 years. He's a doctor in Alaska, and his name is John. He had the same story coming. He said, you know, I just feel like I have a dysfunctional office. And he said, the truth is I'm not communicating well with my staff. I don't know how to do this marketing and all of this. He said, my office manager, I don't know if she's right to keep on or if I should let her go. And when I talked with his office manager, she was feeling the same frustration towards him. You know, she thinks, well, he keeps getting in our chili, he keeps getting into our business, and he's not focused on his thing. And there was just a clear frustration that existed on the team. And this was having a huge impact, not only on their profitability, also on their morale. And so just like the others, John attended our 2-day conference. He got a process and a system. And because he was a coaching client, I went up and met with his staff in Alaska. And sitting down and talking with his office manager, she ended up coming to a 1-day training. Total transformation happened. A year later, he said, Rob, I had no idea that this could happen over the course of just a year. He said, everybody feels like they're just firing on all cylinders. It's finally become a practice where people are excited to be there. And that's why we're on the webinar today. And so what qualifies us to even be talking with you about this? Well, my dad and I started this business, Becoming Your Best, about 7 years ago. And the question that he started researching and asking 40 years ago was, what sets apart great leaders and high-performing teams from everyone else? What's different about a certain select group of people? Because if you can figure out what they do that's different, and then replicate that and teach it to a team, what's the impact? Now you're turning everyone into great leaders and high performers. And that ripples, as we know, through an entire team and organization. Well, after all of this research, what we found, like Chad alluded to, is that there are 12 principles of highly successful leaders. And you see these over and over in high-performing teams and in great leaders. And it doesn't matter the industry. There's very specific processes and tools within the framework, and those are centered on timeless principles that transcend culture, and they'll be just as enforced and powerful in 200 years from now as they are today. And so the question is, how can you take some of these 12 principles and implement them not only in your personal life, but within your practice so that you can truly have your best year ever and really create a thriving business and practice there. And what you're going to feel, even just after this short webinar, as you start to focus on these 12 principles that are very predictable, you're going to feel a shift happen from transactional to transformational. Now think about the definition of those two words. If I was to ask you, how would you define transactional? What are some thoughts that come to your mind? Maybe it's just doing business, you know, just an exchange of information. If I was to ask you to define transformational, how would you define that? And maybe it's making something better, change. Whether it's a process or a person, something is better as a result of you touching it. Now, which way is the world going? Transactional or transformational? And think about that. I mean, everything that we do now in our world tends to be quick, texting, email, and it tends to be very transactional in nature. Yet great leaders and high-performing teams have a focus on being transformational. You know, why does this apply to a business or to your practice? 60 companies, in this case, we'll say practices, that focus on the customer experience will realize 60% higher profits than their competitors. And yes, that applies to doctors, to dentists, to everyone else. And when I say customers, I'm not just talking about the external customers. We're talking about how do you be transformational with the staff, that everyone's aligned and moving the same direction. And this brief webinar will help us start to make that shift from transactional to transformational. And the hope is that this will be the beginning of a journey for you. That this will be an awesome experience that'll carry forward months and even years from now. Now, as we get into these 12 principles together, clearly on a webinar, we're not going to cover all 12, nor will we even try to. You're going to see that these 12 principles are divided into 3 sections. This first one, as you can see, is transformational leadership. The next 4 principles have to do with transformational teams and relationships. I mean, look at principle 7, for example, that we're not going to cover on this webinar. How important is communication in the success of your team? And how about trust? What happens when trust is high versus when trust is low? And what are things that you can do to increase and improve communication, to build and strengthen and maintain trust? And the last 4 principles that you'll notice on the left-hand side have to do with transformational living. Well, today on this brief webinar, look at principles number 2, 3, and 4. Those are where we're going to focus. What happens in a practice, in a team, when you lead with a vision, when you manage with a plan, and when you prioritize your time? What's the difference between not having a vision, not having a plan, or just running around in chaos? Well, those make sense. Remember where these came from. This is studying hundreds of successful leaders and teams, asking what sets them apart from everyone else. And these are clearly some of the areas that set them apart. They had a vision. They had a plan. They focused on what matters most and prioritizing their time. Well, the question then is, how do you do it? This is the principle. What's the how-to? And this is where we developed what's called a strategic rhythm. It's a framework that you can use within your team to really get into a rhythm, and it helps you really live these three principles. How do you develop that vision, a plan, and prioritize your time? And once you have a framework, then it's just a matter of following the recipe and improving it and doing it. Now, words are important. So think about why we use the word strategic rhythm. Well, have you ever watched a sports team, whether it's basketball or baseball or football or whatever it is? Can you tell when a team is out of rhythm? They're out of sync with each other. Isn't that almost painful to watch? You know, basketball, for example, when the person passes the ball and the other person's not there, they weren't looking, it just is hard to watch. Versus a team that is in a rhythm, they're in sync with each other. It's a different feeling watching them. There's a power on their team. They almost look invincible or unstoppable. Well, the same holds true in a practice or a team. You can walk in the doors of an office, and usually within 5 minutes, you can tell whether that office or that team is in a rhythm or whether they're out of sync and out of rhythm. It's just a difference in feeling. There's just you can't quite put your finger on it sometimes, but you can sure feel it. It's very real and tangible. And I think we all know what we're talking about. So if you look at this strategic rhythm and how it applies to you, let's start at the very top of this pyramid with a vision. And you'll notice on the left of that, it says purpose and cause, and on the right, it says the direction. That's the purpose of a vision. It should give your team direction. It should outline for you your purpose, your cause, why you are doing what you're doing as a team. And I love this quote at the bottom of this. This is these posters that we create, Become Your Best, that people hang up on their walls. It says, a rock pile ceases to be a rock pile the moment a single man contemplates in it, bearing within him the image of a cathedral. In other words, how often do we rock pile when in reality there's a cathedral sitting there in our mind's eye? And how do we make it a cathedral? Well, it starts with that vision. And I love what Jack Welch said about this, and think about how this applies to your team. Great leaders create a vision, articulate the vision, passionately own the vision, and relentlessly drive it to completion. Now, he was the CEO of GE, clearly a very successful organization under his tenure. What was his primary focus? Making sure the teams were aligned so that it wasn't a siloed organization. So think about your practice as it is right now, your team. If each of these arrows represent a member of your team, maybe a nurse, maybe a person at the front desk, the doctor, if these arrows aren't aligned, what happens? Can you feel that in a team? Even if it's great where you're at now, have you been a part of an organization where it was like this, where people were misaligned? Isn't it frustrating? Well, this is the #1 reason that an employee or team member will leave, is employee frustration. And employee frustration typically stems from a misaligned expectation. And this is where, as leaders, it's our job to align expectations and create a clear vision. So what's the difference? Once you have a clear vision, you know, the arrows aren't exactly aligned because we're still humans, we're not robots. Yet when you move with a purpose. And there's an awesome feeling when you can walk into a practice and feel the vision. The trick is, how do you create a clear and crisp, a clear vision that everyone understands and that is really bought into by the organization? This is President Kagame. And I don't care whether we're really talking about a practice, an individual, or a country. He was the president of Rwanda at the time when we met him about 3 years ago. And he asked us, Rob, and this is my dad, Steve, on there. He said, Rob and Steve, how do I apply these 12 principles to my country? And so one of the things he did was to develop a vision for his country. And so his vision is Rwanda 2020 to become a middle income country on the global stage by 2020. Fascinating. We're riding in the taxis and we would ask the taxi driver, what's the vision for your country? And they would say it. The hotel staff would say it. Everyone in the country knew what the vision was. And as part of the plan, he shut down the entire country, the government, everyone, 1 day a month, and they would go out and clean the streets. They are now the second fastest growing economy in all of Africa. It's a clean country. It's amazing. What happens when one person steps up with a vision and creates that direction? So with your practice, one of the things I would invite you to do is sit down with your key team members and identify and figure out what your vision is. Now, we don't have the time on this particular webinar to go into all of the how-tos on developing the vision. Some of that is in the book. Even doing something, though, is better than nothing. So sit down with your key leaders at some point in the next 2 to 3 weeks and start to think about, what is the vision for your office? And if you're on the doctor side of it, you definitely need to involve the office manager, and vice versa. Once you have your vision and people are aligned and there's a direction, they feel a purpose and a cause. Now you need to identify what are the core values and standards that are going to be part of your office. These are going to determine your culture. Now remember this statement. This is a powerful one. You will either have a culture by design or you will have a culture by default. Which is it going to be? Because if we don't actively work towards creating this rhythm, if we're not taking action on doing these things, creating a vision and articulating the plan, then we're just going to let it become a culture by default. And you can see what teams are living and have that culture by default. You can sense it when you walk in the door. So that's an idea of what are the standards, what are the core values. Next is, once you have the vision, the direction, how do you make it a reality? And this is where managing with a plan comes into play. And what I'm going to share with you now, I've seen other people say, you know what, that's impossible. Well, this can literally turn the impossible into the possible. Now, if you have a pen and paper, here's something to write down. This is key. A person is 90% more likely to accomplish something when they have a clearly written goal. I'll just say that one more time. A person is 90% more likely to accomplish something when they have a clearly written goal. Yet here's the irony. On average, only 10% of people have clearly written goals. That's 1 in 10. And think about all the reasons why we don't do that. Maybe it's we're too busy. There's this fear of failure once we write it down. Maybe we never learned how to do it. And what's interesting is I've worked with organizations around the world. I have literally looked over the shoulder of thousands of people. I've coached numerous different doctors. This is not a skill set that I would guess that 90 to 95% of them have developed. And boy, once you do it, completely transforms your life as well as your office. Now, if you're in a position where you can do this, here's a fun little exercise. If you're in a place where you can't do it, then you can just visualize and imagine. But I really want you to try this if you're in a place where you can do this. So stand up if you're able to. Okay, so push your chair away from the desk if that's where you're at. Stand up and extend your arms out from your side so that your left arm's out and your right arm is out. Put one leg out in front of you. So extend your front leg out in front of you and close your eyes and try to balance. Keep your eyes closed. Do this for maybe 10 to 15 seconds. This is one of the disadvantages to a webinar is we can't see everyone right now. In a room full of 100 people, there's people all over the place, wobbling, falling. It's pretty funny to watch. Now we're going to switch it up just a little.
Robin, that's my 4th time doing that. I still can't, fall every time.
Oh, it's great to watch. Now we're going to just shift it up just a little bit. Choose a spot on the wall in front of you. Try and give yourself about 4 or 5 feet at least. So just choose a spot on the wall with a laser-like focus. Focus on that spot doing the exact same thing. This time focused on that spot. And again, when you're in a room with people, it's amazing the difference. People are rock solid when they have that focal point. Well, this is what a goal does for you in a plan, is it gives you that rock solid power of focus. All right, hopefully that felt good to get out of your chair and stretch and get a little blood flowing. You can have a seat again if you haven't already. Now, there's an art and a skill set to this. A lot of people say, yeah, we've set goals in the past. In fact, if I asked you to raise your hand, if you've ever had a New Year's resolution, probably 8 or 9 out of 10 people would raise their hands. Yet 85% of New Year's resolutions are broken 2 weeks into the year. And the main reason why that is because the way the goal is written. It is a skill set to come up with a goal. For example, you should never use the words more or better in your goals. And maybe you've heard the acronym SMART. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant to your vision, and time specific. This is a skill set that definitely takes a little bit of practice and help and some coaching. And once you get it right, it's amazing the focus that comes into your organization. So as you write your goals, whether personal or professional, ask yourself, is this specific? If you're using the words more or better, how can you switch those out for a measurable word? So instead of saying lose weight or improve my health, it would be at 126 pounds by September 1st. See, that is a totally different goal. Or I'm going to eat more healthy. Well, no, that doesn't mean anything. Nothing's going to change. And so that's on the personal side. As you think about your organization, we're going to work from big to small. So think about your current team as they are right now. Every team should have 2 to 3 what we call TIGs. These are totally inspirational goals. They should get you fired up and really give you a focus. And these are fairly long in time duration. These are 2 to 5 years. And think about why that is. You don't want more than 3 because these are really your areas of focus. If you have more than 3 TIGs, too many areas of focus. So really zero in on what matters most to that particular team. And the doctor could have 2 or 3 TIGs. The office manager could have 2 or 3 TIGs. You know, the entire practice could have 2 or 3 TIGs. But again, the point is to do something. Doing something is better than doing nothing. And then once you have 2 to 3 TIGs, this is where you want to set up your annual goals. And typically anywhere between 5 to 9 annual goals, both as a practice, yet very specifically, you want to engage the individual. Right now, employee engagement in the United States, if I was to ask you percentage-wise, what would you guess it is? And let me just define employee engagement. Employee engagement is when you have someone who goes to work, they think about how do we make this team better? They're innovating better ways to do things. That's an engaged employee. A disengaged employee is someone who comes to work and they say, you know what, I'm just going to do my job and then I'm going to go home. And that's it. In the United States right now, employee engagement is sitting at 32%. That means that 2 out of 3 employees are disengaged. They just don't care. And this is a powerful way to increase that number, which happens to be one of the leading predictors of profitability, is employee engagement, which makes total sense. If you've got a team around you of people that are always in a good mood thinking of ways to improve, isn't that the kind of team we would all want to be a part of? Well, the annual goals allow you to get that power of focus. And my recommendation is, depending on who's listening to this, if you're an office manager or doctor, is you'll notice to the right it says yearly. And that is take your team out on your yearly retreat and take a full day and go over the state of the practice, the state of the office, and go through each person's annual goals as they apply to the practice and make sure that the arrows are aligned, pointing the same direction. And then take that same process and go down to the quarterly goals. So right now, if I was to ask you, when are your quarterly meetings, what are the dates? And if you don't have some, great. In the spirit of good, better, best, maybe you can put some dates on the calendar of when you'd have your quarterly meetings. Now, these are much smaller and simpler than your annual meetings. This would be a simple 1 to 3 hour quarterly meeting to make sure that you're aligned. And this is what a goals format might look like for a team member. So we just finished Q1. Think about the people on your team right now. They would put Q1 highlights, and then what are their goals for Q1 and what's the report? How did they do? On Q2, what are some goals and the key actions that they would need to do to accomplish those goals? This might sound rudimentary, it might sound basic. It is so rarely done in an organization and can transform your team. This is a person named Zach Lovinger. He attended our 2-day conference, and he was averaging in the insurance business about 4 sales a day. We challenged him to go to 8, and he said, oh, I don't know if I can do that, you know, that's impossible. He came back 3 months later and said, I am totally blown away. I'm averaging 12 sales per day. He had a 300% increase in revenue. His life is totally transformed. Well, what changed? He now has a vision. He has a clear focus. His TIGs, his 2 to 5 year goals, his annual goals. He meets with his team on a quarterly basis. None of this did he do before. And so he's in a rhythm that he has never been in his life. Now, on a personal level, let me ask you this. How many listening to this webinar right now have personal goals? That they're written out and that they're in a place where you look at them often. And there's usually a huge drop-off between professional goals and personal goals. It's something we think about on a professional level, but not so much on the personal level. And so without spending a whole lot of time on this, let me invite you to do something that would be transformational for you. And that is to look at your life through the lens of different roles that matter most. So when I say roles, maybe you're a mother or a father. Maybe you're a spouse, a friend, a son or daughter. What are the roles that matter most to you? And within each of those roles, come up with 1 to 5 goals for this year in 2018 that would really be a SMART goal, specific and measurable goal within that role that would get you excited. So you may end up with anywhere between 5 to 7 roles, and the most important role is you personally. And think about what those look like. Actually take about an hour to 2 to come up with your roles and goals for the year. Now, this is my daughter, Bella. And about 3 years ago, as she was doing her roles and goals, one of her roles was author. And I thought, oh, that's a pretty cool role, Bella. Why would you come up with that role? And she said, oh, I don't know, I just want to be an author. Okay, great, what's the goal? And so she worked on it and we tweaked it a little bit together, you know, it was a little mentoring. And ultimately her goal was to write a children's book by December 20th. That's awesome, Bella, great job. And so in the spring, we sat down and said, okay, how are we doing on the goal? And she said, well, I haven't really done anything yet. Okay, no problem. So we decided to write this book together. We make it a team project. And so we decided the title should be A to Z, the best in you and me. And what she decided to do was go through the alphabet and choose a word associated with each letter. So for example, A is attitude, B is beautiful, C is courage, D is dream, and so on through the entire alphabet. And she'd go online and get these little quotes and then tweak them, and we'd make them her own. And you can see at the bottom of the page there's a question. And this is designed to be a question that a parent could have with their son or daughter. So for example, what are some beautiful things about you? You know, I was all proud and I asked this to my 7-year-old, expecting this great, glorious answer. And she said, Dad, there's nothing beautiful about me. I rolled out of the bed. I thought I'm a total failure as a father. It gave us the chance to engage in a conversation. And now when we read this book with my youngest, I'll ask her this question, what are some beautiful things about you? She'll say, oh, my hair and my eyes and my teeth. What a total transformation. And that happened because of Bella's book that she wrote. And we've gotten these different videos, and it's been amazing for Bella to see the feedback that her book has had. Now, a little plug for her, this pediatric office bought a bunch of books to put in their office. So if you would like a copy of Bella's book, you can see her website right there at the bottom, bellasbook.net, and you can get a copy of her book. Use it for your office, for your own kids. I mean, imagine sitting down having these conversations. Now, why did I just take 3 minutes of your valuable time to share that story? This is us standing on our back porch on December 20th, exactly the day that her goal was written to finish the book, to write a children's book by December 20th. So here's my question for you is, what would have happened had this 11-year-old at the time not come up with the goal? What % chance is it that I would have written this book? Well, a 0% chance. It wasn't even on the radar. And that's the power of having that focal point in the goal. So what are your goals, both on the professional side, as you go down from your TIGs to your annual goals to your quarterly goals, and on the personal side? What are your roles and goals for 2018? And I would invite you over the next 2 weeks to finish your roles and goals personally and see what impact it has. They may not be perfect. There'll probably be some ways that you could write them better. Again, you're in the 10% just by putting something on paper. Most people in the transactional world will never sit down to even make that effort. So this is the beginning to managing with a plan. And remember this is not by accident. You will either have a culture by design or you will have a culture by default. Now, where does the rubber really meet the road? What's the difference between the high-performing team and just your average run-of-the-mill team? And I would suggest that it comes down to your weekly alignment meeting. Without this meeting, the goals oftentimes fall far short of where they could have been. And so let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. How do you take something transactional and make it transformational? So by this weekly alignment meeting, what I'm inviting you and your team to do is, if you're not already doing it, to have like a Monday morning operations meeting. Now this could take 30 minutes to an hour total. And if you're already doing this, I'm going to give you an idea to shift it from transactional to transformational. And there's a huge impact in doing what I'm about to suggest. And that is to focus on one of these 12 principles every week for about 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. And think about the shift. Most people have a meeting and it's, okay, here's what we need to do this week, and here we go. And that's all transactional, and that's still better than doing nothing. That creates alignment. We're taking it up a notch. Think about and imagine your team sitting down and discussing one of these principles and the impact it would have. Now, what do you do after 12 weeks? You start over. You can go through all 12 principles 4 times a year. Now, let's just go to principle number 7, be an effective communicator. So let's say 7 weeks from now, you're sitting down with your team and you're discussing this principle. Now, for teams that would like it, we can send you a weekly email that has an action item and a little story about that principle, some tips. But let's say you're talking about communication and one person brings up, you know what, if we did this, it would sure help our team. And another person says, wow, I hadn't even considered that. What if we did this? And suddenly you're having this transformational brainstorm on how to make the office better. And you have the condition and the framework to do it within. Whereas most people don't know what to do and they're just transactional day to day to day. This very process, I had the chance to coach the president of the Dallas Cowboys. Jerry Jones Jr. is a good friend. And he said, Rob, this is exactly what we need as an organization. So in 2016, after coaching as president and doing a few different seminars for their senior team, they had, by the way, they're no different than anyone else. They had no vision. When I showed up, there was no vision. There was no strategic rhythm. They said, Rob, man, we're just a siloed organization. The left hand is not talking to the right. So there was a lot of things that changed for them in 2016. Now they have a clear vision. Everyone understands it. This weekly meeting was their key to success. I flew out to Dallas and I talked with their COO and he showed me, he opened up a binder with the PowerPoints, reviewing some of the lessons learned from those meetings and discussions. He said, Rob, we're talking like millions and millions of dollars of ideas and action items that came from this meeting. It has totally transformed our team. And he is exactly right. That story has been repeated over and over again. So if you're watching this without being able to go into too much detail, here's a sample agenda that you can use for that meeting. It doesn't have to be complex. Start the meeting with your office vision, and that takes 30 seconds. Next, discuss one of the 12 principles for just a few minutes. I say 5 to 10, but maybe 10 to 15 would actually be better. And the idea is that you walk out of that discussion with at least one action item, something you can do as a team that week to get better. So that's not just some random discussion. And then after that transformational discussion, yes, what matters most this week? Who, what, when? So my question for you, and something you can discuss, is when could you hold an effective weekly alignment meeting? And if you're already having that meeting, how could you incorporate one principle a week to shift it to a transformational meeting? And I promise you that by doing this, it will have a huge impact on your results. Here's part of this email that this pediatric team sent me. I won't say his name, of course, another doctor who's a coaching client. We met 3 months ago. We came up with his action plan. None of this stuff was in place in his practice. He has a bunch of doctors that work with him. When we walked out, he said, Rob, this has been probably one of the most incredible 3 to 4 hours of my life and my career. He finally had a focus that he could go do. 2 months later, he said, Rob, this is going to turn into millions and millions of dollars for a practice. This has been huge. Well, what changed? He now has the focus. He now has in there a culture that he's really creating by design rather than just what was there before, creating a lot of frustration. So you can see in this second paragraph here of what this pediatric team said. You know, they said after this conference, we started incorporating these principles into our weekly team meetings. Now, 4 months later, because that was so impactful, they created a separate meeting that they dedicate just to the principle that week. Bravo to them. That is exactly right. I guarantee that is now a transformational office, and this is the very same group that was talking about all the communication problems, all of the other things that were going on, and now those are pretty much gone. They said, we love coming to work. It is a totally different environment than where we were just a few months ago. So if you would like a PDF of this rhythm, and I'm also going to send you, if you would like, a flow sheet from left to right so that you could at least get started with your team, text the word success to that number. And I'll send you, it's a JPEG image because I can't text you a PDF. Within that text, if you would like a PDF, I'll send you Jamie's email and you can email him. But I'll send you both of these sheets right here, that triangle, that pyramid, as well as this flow sheet, which is the exact same thing. It's just in a flow from left to right instead of the pyramid. Just text that word success to 801-876-1350. And I will respond to you personally on that. Okay, and the bottom of this pyramid is how do you get down to the daily focus and execution? And this is the third and final principle for today, which is how do you prioritize your time? And I wish we were all together. If I was to ask you, do you ever feel task saturated right now? How many would raise our hands? Probably most of us. 68% of leaders and people feel like this is their number one challenge, is how do you prioritize your time amongst so many competing priorities? And it's my personal opinion that a transformational leader makes time. And it's one thing to say, yeah, prioritize your time or make it. The real question is, how do you do it? So right now, we're going to shift away from the business and really get into your personal life. I'm going to share with you a process that I'm 100% confident can transform your life. And it's called pre-week planning. Now, imagine what a pilot does as part of pre-flight planning. What are all the things that they check? Well, they check, the weather, the route of flight. What's our destination weather look like? What's the altitude we need to fly at? So there's all of these things that go into it. In the world of a fighter pilot, it just increases in complexity. So what would happen if a pilot said, you know what, today we're just going to go out and wing it. We're just going to give it our best shot. Well, most likely it would be chaos. People would die. Well, how many times do we go into our weeks without a plan and expect a different result? And that's exactly why, just like a pilot would never dare jump in their jet without doing pre-flight planning, we coined the term pre-week planning, and I invite you to think about this as sacredly and as religiously as you would treat it if you were a pilot getting ready to jump into your jet. And here's what pre-week planning is for you. It will help you schedule your priorities rather than prioritize your schedule. And if I was to ask how many of us have like little to-do lists or little things like that, most of us would raise our hand. And those are good. They're not bad, those are good. This takes that to a whole nother level and enhances it and makes it even better. And so what do I mean by scheduling your priorities rather than prioritizing your schedule? Well, first of all, in my experience, this is something you typically want to do on Saturday or Sunday, and think about why that is. What happened if we wait till Monday morning? We're already in the thick of the fire, right? And so you really want to do this Saturday or Sunday, and it typically will take you about 30 to 40 minutes. And here's the process of how pre-week planning works. And we've created a Becoming Your Best Planner. Although you don't need it, what I've seen are the people who are really successful in pre-week planning have a tool. You know, it's like a doctor. If you're trying to do something and you don't have the right tool, it becomes exponentially more difficult to perform that procedure. It's exactly the same with pre-week planning. Do you need a Becoming Your Best Planner? No. It makes it exponentially easier when you have the tool. So if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see the 5 simple steps to pre-week planning. Now imagine you doing this on the weekend. How different would you be than the general population? Number 1 is to review your personal vision. Well, that means you have to have a personal vision first to be able to review it. Number 2 is to review your annual goals. In other words, as you look at your roles and goals, and you look at some of those focal points that we discussed earlier, what can you do this week to move the needle in accomplishing that goal? The third is to identify your roles. Now we're going to assume that you're using a Becoming Your Best Planner. If you look across the top here, here's just a sample. And Vaseo happens to be a company that ordered a bunch of these, and so we co-branded it with them. Personal is you, taking care of yourself, mind, heart, body, soul, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And you can see in there, this role is all about you. Read 15 pages a day, meditate, exercise. Let's look at the spouse and parent role. You know, date night, basketball with your son, write a thank you note. This morning when I walked out the door, I left a little note on my son's car seat, just telling him what a great young man he was and how much I loved him. That was part of pre-week planning. And so this is the idea, is you look at your different roles, and then step 4 is to choose weekly action items of what matters most in that role, and 5 is when will you do it. If you don't use a paper-based planner, that is no problem. I use Google, for example. This top part, and I don't know if you can see my arrow, but this top part, if you look at your life through what we call Kairos, which is Latin for priorities. What are the priorities that matter most to you? And you're bringing Kairos together, where that's the leadership part of your life, and you're matching it with Chronos, which is time. So this top part, as you look at your roles and what matters most this week, that's the Kairos. If you don't use a paper planner, no problem. If you use Google or Outlook, you still go through this top part like you would every single time. It's a process, it's a framework. And you're matching Kairos with Chronos when you transfer it to your Google Calendar or to Outlook. So if you want to become your best planner and you use paper, great. It's a fabulous tool. Even if you don't, still going through that top part, you can take those action items and transfer them to your calendar. And this is a life-changing process. This will bring order to chaos. People will look at you differently. You will feel different about your life. I'm pretty careful about guarantees, but I can guarantee you this. If you do pre-week planning consistently, everything about your current life will get better. Relationships get better. Your personal health gets better. Your peace that you feel inside gets better. Your performance within your team and what you contribute at work gets better. Why? Because you're thinking about your life through the lens of priorities on a weekly basis and thinking, what can you do specifically in those roles that matter most this week? How could anybody not get better doing that? And I love what Zig Ziglar said. I believe that being successful means having a balance of success stories across the many areas of your life. You can't truly be considered successful in your business life if your home life is in shambles. And pre-week planning is a way to have a balance of success stories across every area of your life. And if I was to ask this, you know, who would like to have better health? To feel more peace and connected with your true authentic self, we would all raise our hands to that. Pre-week planning is the tool that can help you do exactly that. Let me just share with you one more brief example. This is my family, and sitting on my lap is Lana. About 5 months ago, I went to Indiana to go do a seminar with about 200 leaders. And as part of pre-week planning, I wrote, under the role of father, write a note to Lana. Pretty simple, right? I mean, it takes all like 30 seconds to do that. So she went to school. I wrote a simple note and left it on her bed. I just told her how much I loved her and what a great girl she was. On the way back, sitting on my headboard when I came back at 1 in the morning the next day from Indiana, was this note from Lana. Just take a second and read that. I love how it says, you know, I love you to the moon and back even more than all the jelly beans in the world. And this started this fun little back and forth of notes. She even took one into my son's room and wrote a note to him similar to this one. And, you know, at 16 years old, his response to that was pretty cool. And that's what happens when we start to make a shift from transactional to transformational. Everything will change. So as you look at these 12 principles of highly successful leaders, on this brief webinar, you've just gotten a glimpse into 2, 3, and 4. Lead with a vision, manage with a plan, and prioritize your time. My invitation is, if you haven't texted the word success already to that number, you can do that. Start developing your strategic rhythm within your practice. What's the vision? What are the core values and standards? What are your 2 to 3 TIGs? What are the annual goals of each key team member? And when is your annual meeting to go over the state of the practice and review each person's annual goals? When are your quarterly goals, when are your quarterly meetings scheduled for this year? And does each person have a template where they can come up with their areas of focus for the upcoming quarter? That is totally living a life by design rather than living a life by default. And then prioritizing your time, having that weekly alignment meeting with your team, focused on a transformational principle every week, and really coming down to the daily focus and execution, which is you doing pre-week planning, helping you prioritize your time and schedule your priorities rather than prioritizing your schedule. Well, still, look at all the other principles that we haven't covered. You know, how to innovate through imagination, to improve communication, to build and maintain trust. That's where that weekly meeting can become powerful. So what now? I know that some of you are thinking, you know, what can you do at this point? There's a couple things. One is to invest in a BYB planner for your team and start doing pre-week planning at a minimum. You're going to get better at it with time, and that's great. The art is in the start. You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. And this is at least a starting point for you. The other part is to invest in a copy of Becoming Your Best, the 12 Principles of Highly Successful Leaders. This is a pretty high-level overview. You know, you can only do so much on a webinar. So the question is, how do you really get focused into the details as you develop your vision and set up your plans with your team? And if you'll use that discount code, capital VIP and lowercase discount, you can get 30% off. I also invite you, it's not on here, but you can get a copy, a bundled book of both the book Become Your Best and our newly released book, Transformation Challenge. And once you read Becoming Your Best, if you read the Transformation Challenge with your office, that will bring in a whole new set of skills on how to develop and execute a plan to improve your office. Now, this is something I debated whether I should do or not. I'm flying out to Kansas, in fact, tomorrow, to meet with a group of doctors on how to do exactly what we just talked about here on this webinar with their practice. We're going to go over in detail, helping them develop a vision. What does that look like? Setting it up on their dates and calendars and getting them really aligned into a rhythm. The first 3 people to email me at my personal email address, rob@becomingyourbest.com, I'll give you a free 30-minute coaching session. To really make that valuable, assuming now I'm talking to those 3 people, what I'd ask you to do is to come prepared with the top 3 things that you would like to address, and we'll try and get through those as quickly as we can on that call to have a huge impact. So that's only for the first 3 people. I don't have more bandwidth than that to give, but I would love to meet some of you. So rob@becomingyourbest.com. Now for others, this is what would really apply to you. And I know some of you are wondering about this, and that is, how could you do something with your team like John did in Alaska or coming to the conference? There is a 2-day leadership conference really close to where Chad lives and where I live, out in Heber City, Utah. It's what's called the Homestead Resort. And this is a great opportunity. If you have people on your team that you want to send, or if you want to come like as a doctor and office manager, we see that happen oftentimes. It is an incredible experience that will help you align your practice. It is 2 days of stepping away from being in the business and you focusing on the business. It is a transformational experience, absolutely guaranteed. And if you have a spouse and want to bring your spouse, let us know and we can work on that. So that's one way to do it. The other is a customized team training for you. And that kind of ties into executive coaching. That's really coming to you and sitting down with your team and getting very focused on what it is that you want to accomplish. To include, there's an opportunity to do an organizational assessment. You can take this with your team and you can see where your potential pain points are, as well as where your opportunities for growth are. So if communication is an issue, that will become very apparent in an organizational assessment. And then there's specific things you can do to address that and fix it. Very quickly, you can address those kinds of things and totally transform your team. So Jamie's the point of contact for any of these types of things. He can give you a great discount. The first one is, like I mentioned, is in April out in Utah. The second one is in October. that would be a fabulous experience. His number is 801-671-3351, and it might just be best to email him directly at jamie@becomingyourbest.com. So either one of those work. If you want to come out to the conference or have us come to you, that's great. For right now, a wonderful starting point is to simply go to the website, becomingyourbest.com, get a book, get a planner, and that at least gets you started. And for the first 3 people, I look forward to connecting with you for your free coaching session. So with that being said, thank you for investing your time. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. I'm extremely confident in the power of the principles and the tools and what they can do for you in helping you have your best year ever, and in building a practice that will thrive and where people love to come be a part of your team. So with that being said, thank you for being here. Chad, anything else that you wanted to talk about here?
You know, Rob, first of all, thank you so much for taking your valuable time to be here. I know how busy your schedule is and how often you travel. I'll just add a couple things to what you've said. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we've taken many members of our team to these 2-day conferences, and we've seen it happen in our own organization. In fact, I bought a copy of Becoming Your Best for everyone on my sales team, and we've had weekly meetings and we've had annual meetings, but we started to get a stronger focus on those and having a stronger purpose and discussing values every single week from one of the 12 principles, and making that an emphasis, but also really emphasizing my team that they memorized our vision and values, that they knew it, that it was really integrated within everything that they do. And that's become a big part of who we are, is them understanding that. And that's where they come from, as a position of helping. And that's been a big deal. It's really, transformed our organization to where, since really putting this in place last fall, we've seen a 30% growth in our sales. We've seen it happen. But I can tell you this: I bought my wife and myself a copy of the planner, and we do pre-week planning together, and then individually and together, and then with our family every Sunday night. And that time is so valuable. I mean, not only because we do have a lot of things going on. I've got kids in baseball and dance and basketball and track and all the other activities going on, but it's another church activity. But it's amazing if we don't have that alignment, that our priorities get lost. And so we have to make sure those get scheduled in there, and our date nights and our one-on-one time with kids. And that's been truly helpful for our family. And so I've seen it personally, and I've seen it on the business as well, which is why I wanted to share this message today. Well, I've had just a couple questions that came up, and wanted to maybe get you to address a couple of these that I thought were really good questions. But one of them, I think a lot of the organizations, any business faces, is how long do you hold on to a person who isn't really getting with transformational changes in the organization?
Yeah, this is a great question, and one of the most common questions. So from my experience, here's the answer to that. When I was talking with the Dallas Cowboys, before we met with them and their senior leadership team, I told Jerry, I said, Jerry, 2 things are going to happen here. 1, you're going to have people who engage who never engaged before. 2, you're going to have 1 or 2 people that may not rise with the water. That rising water lifts all boats. Well, some boats may be anchored down and not want to rise. And you're going to see all of this. There were 2 managers that he was on the verge of letting go before we ever started. In October, this is 8 or 9 months after we started, 2 of these managers who he was ready to let go had risen to become 2 of the best managers, absolutely killing it. In large measure because of the things you talked about. They now had a vision, they had a clarity and focus. That weekly meeting was a huge impact for them. Well, there was one manager who, before it all started, was pretty good, just average, I guess you could say. She didn't rise with the water. It just didn't work anymore. It clearly wasn't a fit. And so they helped her transition out in October. And one of the things that I've learned is we've got to ask ourselves as leaders, so as doctors or office managers, is 1, have we put them in a position to win? In other words, have we given them the mindset and skill set to become their best, to unleash that potential? Because sometimes, like those 2 managers at the Cowboys, they had never been through any type of training before. So you're asking them to do something that maybe they didn't know how to do as leaders. Well, after going through these 3 separate leadership trainings that we did with them, they clearly had the mindset and skill set at this point, and they had a framework to operate within, and they totally transformed. That's not always the case. So number 1, we need to ask, have we given our team the mindset and skill set to be successful and become their best? If the answer to that is yes, and they're still not engaging, you cut that cable as fast as you can. It generally won't get better with time. In fact, you know, a negative employee or someone with a bad attitude can be a cancer to the organization. It is my #1 hiring criteria at this point in my life is, what is their attitude? Do they have the problem solving, go get them type attitude? The skill set's no doubt important. That is a critical piece. I've got to make sure the mindset is in place before I look at the skill set. I assume that if we're talking with someone, they have the skill set. So that's the big picture answer to that, Chad, is #1, make sure as leaders that we are giving them the mindset and skill set to become their best. And if we can say we've truly done that and put them in opportunities and training conferences where they can do that, and they're still not engaging, cut that cord fast and help them find something else and transition out to another place that is a win for them and a win for you. Because someone who's a bad attitude or has a cankerous attitude can be a cancer to an organization and to a team. It can sour the mood so quickly, and we all know that. We've been a part of someone, you know, we've been a part of a team where there was someone like that. So hopefully that helps at least begin to answer that question.
Thank you, and I agree with you. You know, as a business owner, I see it as well. We've had some people that we held on to probably for too long, and we've learned those lessons. And so we try to make sure, like you said, that have we given them the tools to succeed? Have we helped them? And if so, if they're still not getting there, cut bait quickly, move on. There are others out there who will absolutely respond. So I agree with that. Another question that came up was what's the difference between a vision and a mission statement?
That's a good question too. There's really not much of a difference. It's really a semantics difference. In my experience, in walking into most organizations, when I ask someone, what's your mission statement? Most people will point to the wall and say it's up on the wall. Well, that clearly it's a wall ornament. It's not even doing anything at that point for the team. And so in most organizations I've worked in, I'll say most, not all, but most, the term mission statement has almost now associated with it a negative trigger. Like people are like, oh, our mission statement's up on the wall. Whereas a vision, although very similar to a mission statement, should give that purpose and direction to a team. And it's not necessarily easy to come up with a vision. It's why most people don't do it. It's tough. It takes a little effort. And most people like to come up with a lot of big, long words and put them out there. When I was helping the Dallas Cowboys, as an example, since we've been using them, I'll just stay on that line. They initially sent me this big draft of their vision. I said, man, no, we got to cut that thing down to like a third of that, 2 or 3 sentences max. And so they trimmed it down, totally different. So the answer is they're very similar from my perspective. It's just a difference in wording. The word mission statement, though, the words mission statement have almost become a negative thing for a lot of people to where it has that negative stigma. It's like, oh, a mission statement. Whereas the vision should burn deeply within the organization. It should create alignment. People should understand it. It should bring the team together and give them a unified purpose. And every single person on the team should be able to recite the vision on spot. If I ask you what the vision is, you should be able to say, our vision, for example, to over-deliver and provide an outstanding customer experience and reach 1 billion people through becoming your best. Everybody should know that, and I should be able to ask it and get a response spot on, and then they should be able to tell me how their role aligns to that vision. You know, how do they contribute to that vision? And that's what any organization hopefully should have. So whether you're going to call it a mission statement or a vision, it should provide that clear direction, and everyone should understand it, and it should burn deeply and give a direction.
That's very helpful. And that actually answers another question. There's, you know, how long should it be? And you know, sometimes it just, you know, they can be so long that doesn't happen. And it's not easy. I can tell you this, that it took us several months to get our vision right and to work on that. But once we did, you know, it also was like, there it is. That just was the right thing, and we knew it right away. And our company vision is to make our clients' lives better by supporting their professional and personal success. And we believe that. We recognize that you as doctors are small business owners, just like us, and you also have families. And if we can make your life easier by bringing in, the digital marketing services that Advice Media offers, certainly, but if we can bring other things to the table, like becoming your best, and Rob Shallenberger today, that helps you think about these things, that makes your life easier, your company better, we feel like we're accomplishing our vision. So it's been awesome to do that. Rob, we are out of time today. I again want to thank you and thank our audience for being here today and participating in this webinar. And you know, you did an amazing job. Here we are trying to cram basically a full day of training in those first 4 principles on on transformation leadership into an hour. And I applaud you for doing that. And thank you again for taking time to do that. And again, thank each and every one of you who's participating today and listening. Thank you. And I hope that some of you have already taken Rob up on his offer of coaching. That's extremely generous, Rob. Thank you. I can't believe you did that. I'm kind of speechless. So again, thank you very much. Let's go out and make some changes, everybody. Let's go out and do some things that are absolutely going to make us better and help us get where we need to be.
Hey, thank you so much, Chad, and thank you for everyone.
All right. Take care, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Have a great day.